I want to talk next about insurance, homeowners insurance, and flood insurance. It is no secret we are now in hurricane season. Fortunately, we haven't hit the heaviest part of hurricane season just yet, and we are hoping and praying that we have a very light hurricane season this year. That is one of the biggest risks to the success and healthfulness of our real estate market in Tampa Bay over the next year is how light or heavy our hurricane season is this year. If we have a light hurricane season, it is really going to propel the real estate market, especially with some of the tax incentives coming, the population growth, the jobs growth in our market, all the things pointing towards Florida continuing to operate a better economy for businesses than a lot of other states, a better economy for wealthy people moving here. Our luxury market has been performing incredibly well. And so what I mean, to say about the importance of insurance right now is if you don't have flood insurance, when I say you don't, it means one of two things. Either you've chosen not to have it because you don't have a mortgage, or your lender doesn't require it. And I want to talk to this group of people because I have so many customers, even from 2 years ago, still dealing with the financial consequences of choosing not to get flood insurance that would have been very cheap. Ask yourself, if you are choosing not to have it because you've paid cash, I hope the land value of your property is massive. If we do get hit with a storm, the areas that have been determined or required to have flood insurance, it's like throwing dart at a dartboard. It's based purely on elevation, not historical flood patterns, not areas where the irrigation is terrible and they flood always, but the elevation of your home is the main determining factor. It would be like, it would be comparable to determining people's car insurance simply based on one factor. Like, imagine if you looked at the car insurance and it was only based on the car that you drove. Not the history of the driver, not the history of the market that they're in, not the likelihood of a crash based on how many miles they drive or where they drive, but simply the car they drive. That's one factor. Well, flood insurance is also determined predominantly based on one factor. It's a horrible underwriting scenario that leads to lots of people every year getting flooded, getting hit with storms that don't have proper insurance because their quote unquote lender told them that they don't have to have it. Where that's coming from is the government. I'm not a fan of trusting what the government tells you should or shouldn't do. Okay. If they're I don't even think they know how to let me go to the DMV and then ask yourself if you think that they know how to manage stuff. Don't trust them. Really think twice about the risk to yourself, because the determining factor that they're using to decide whether you need or don't need flood insurance to satisfy your mortgage lender's risk is such a flawed logic. I would encourage you to really think about it. Florida, look, Tampa's a peninsula. Florida's a peninsula. There's water all around us. The risk is high during hurricane season of flooding, whether that's flooding from rain, whether that's flooding from, storms, whether it's flooding from a local body of water, even including in some instances plumbing issues that happen that cause a flood. So, the best advice I have for you is think twice about it. If you're not required by your lender, AKA the government, to have it, look at the cost of it and ask yourself if the juice is worth the squeeze. Is it worth saving that $1,000 or $1,500 to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of potential risk? So much of the storm damage back in 2024 was from people that didn't have flood insurance and weren't, quote unquote, required by their mortgage lender. So that's one thing. The second thing that I would tell you this time of year, think about getting a second opinion on your insurance. I believe that every year you can look at shopping your insurance to save money. I mentioned that before in the prior segment about the value of investing in real estate, and sometimes it becomes more valuable because you can save money. You can get comparable coverage from a different carrier at a better price. So if you own rental property or your primary property and you want to save some money, shop around. Maybe there's a carrier that's an A+ carrier that has, cheaper policy with similar coverage, or maybe you have coverage you don't need. Maybe you can take on more risk. Maybe you can raise your deductible. I would recommend, again, shopping for carriers. You may sometimes need to get inspections. You may need to get wind mitigations. There may be things that you need to do, But this time of year is a great opportunity to do it, especially if you don't have flood. I even saw people last year decide to shop around on insurance, and they ended up paying about the same, but they added flood. So their primary policy, they found a cheaper good plan, and then they added flood to it to give themselves some extra protection. So even if it's less about saving money and more about extra protection, those are things that you can do right now. But I still have so many customers fighting and dealing with financial losses from hurricanes because they chose not to have flood insurance because the government and their lender told them they didn't have to have it, or because they own the property free and clear and they decided not to have it. Rule of thumb for me is if your land value is massive enough to where you lose very little, like if the home is damaged. Look, there's a lot of homes on like Davis Island, Harbor Island, waterfront South Tampa, where the land value is high enough that some, especially if it's an old kind of not a new modern build, where the house becomes kind of not super valuable, the value's really in the land. In those scenarios, maybe it makes sense, but that's a rare circumstance. Most people in Tampa Bay should really look at having flood insurance.